Welcome to 100 Days of Making Cyberpunks. I'm Nicholas Ivan Leendorf, aka Nil Gravity, and what I'm doing is spending 100 days trying to see if I could stay on the schedule of averaging 2 pages a day on my comic, Cyberpunks. So these are the spreadsheets where I can keep track of things, because I'm not very consistent. If you didn't watch any of the videos, I've gone into it. But last week I did a ton of thumbnailing, and so I didn't do any this week, but I did a bunch of other stuff. So I'm on schedule that way. So not a whole lot to explain there. So I thought I wanted to talk a little bit about diversity. It's been an issue in comics, and like Cyberpunks has a pretty diverse cast. There's just as many. You can't really tell the chick with the robot arms. She's Asian, and she's not the only Asian. And then there's a Mexican guy too, and so kind of the tricky thing about diversity is that I don't know if I'm the best person to talk about to tell. Well, I know I'm not the best person to talk about the stories of other people, and that's why we need artists and creators of color. But on the other hand, I don't want to leave them out, because they exist in the world. Minorities exist in the world, and also, like, if Cyberpunks becomes a movie, do I really want a movie where everybody's white? So, and there's social issues that are involved too, which makes it tricky. So when I'm doing like a smaller story, like I did a 24-hour comic called Longtooth, there's only 2 characters in it, so I didn't really worry about diversity. It had 2 white guys in it, because it was a story that just took place in Minnesota. The whole story takes course mostly over one day, and then I have a comic called Mental, if you ever picked it up. It's basically a 2-character comic where it's got a white dude and an Asian chick. Not a lot of diversity there, and a lot of my other comics there, it's all white people, because that's just the thing I'm most comfortable writing most of the time, because I like to write about terrible people, and so if I show a comic with only 2 characters and the terrible person is black, then that is going to be like a message. So here in Mental, you might not be able to tell, but the guy in the 3rd panel, I envisioned him as Ethiopian. There was like I used to live in a neighborhood that was like it was like kind of equal parts black and African and Caribbean people, and so I wanted to have a Ethiopian guy, and later I introduced a character called Alicia, the lesbian wingman, and she's clearly a black woman. So yeah, those characters got introduced a little bit later into it, but they were always intended to be in it. So now, on my book Crawlers, that when you first meet the main characters, they're all white, but I was saying something more about geek culture at that point. So, I wanted to put in the idea that it's kind of a white straight man thing, and there actually is a black character in the main group, but he's playing a goblin, because the comic is about people playing a role-playing game. And so the first 3 chapters, he's playing a goblin. No one knows. He's kind of a hybrid character. He's based on my friend Andy, who's white, and my friend Maurice, who the name might give it away. But they were both a pain in the ass to the DM, so I kind of mashed them into one player. And then later, the first clue that that player is black is he plays the Rastafarian, which is sort of my take on a Gungan when they're playing the Star Wars role-playing, like a spoof of the Star Wars role-playing game. So finally, in Chapter 4, they're basically playing themselves in a White Wolf type role-playing game, and so you finally see in chapter 4 that he's been a black dude this whole time. So like I said, I was trying to make some kind of commentary about how white role-playing games are, even though my introduction was through Maurice, the guy who started me on role-playing. So okay, so I had a comic called Weight of Eternity, where it starts out with this kind of prequel about a black woman on a date with a guy, and there's something weird with him, and I don't know if there's any issues there, but I did have a problem later in the comic. The comic is about basically two characters. It's a white woman and this supernatural creature who doesn't have white skin, or the right amount of thumbs. So, that was the main thing. But the problem I kind of created for myself is that in the beginning of the comic, I had this idea for the scene where I wanted to show like a bunch of black guys hanging out, and then so you think it's going to be like this kind of stereotypical setup, where they harass a white woman, and it turns out that she's actually there to kill one of them because she's been like hypnotized, and then I fucked the whole thing up, because when I started getting into the drawing phase, I was like, oh, I should make this comic more exciting. So I give the black dudes guns. It's like I totally ruined what I was going for, and I was making all these little incremental decisions. And the main guy isn't even, the guy she's going to kill isn't even black. He's just, he's a shapeshifter, but he can't change his pigment, so it's kind of blackface, I guess. But, this was 10 years ago. People weren't really talking about it that much. So yeah, it's just sort of accidentally insensitive. Yeah, that kind of thing just comes up, and I'm kind of worried that about that kind of thing happening again in my current comic. Because I'm going to have characters of varying personalities and things going on, and, I don't want to whitewash them too much in that, like, just like, there's no cultural aspect to it. So I try to address how they see the world differently because of race, and it comes up because of the themes of cyberpunks, because they're imprisoned, and part of the reason there's such a diverse cast is because when something happens to cause internment camps to start in America again, minorities are going to get hit the worst. So that's like kind of part of the theme of the book, is that there's the reason there's so many black people in it, and well, not just black people, because there's Asians and everything else, is that like people who are not in a position of power are going to be more likely to be targeted by this. So here's hoping I don't screw it up and that I get it all right. So the only thing you could do is try to be aware of it and do the best you can.